when I caddied, there was about 6 of us boys that were all cousins, and so we would caddy together and have fun together. One day out at the golf course, I think I was about 12 years old, 12 or 13. They had what they called a creek party. All the older caddies threw the younger caddies in the water in the creeks, and if I'm not mistaken, there were 33 went in the creek that day. And all of them said, "Glenn, how come you're dry?" And I said, "I've got about 5 cousins here." And they said, "That doesn't mean anything." "Oh, yes, it does." And I never even got a finger wet. And, but all the kids said, "That isn't fair." And that's why it worked out. But it didn't hurt them to get wet. They didn't drown or anything. They just threw them in that water, and they had to dry out for a while. I'm not sure if I told you this before, but there was one caddy out there that he was a great organizer, and he had a streak about him that was a little bit mean, but it was fun-loving. He said, well, there was a song that was on a hit parade. They called it Little Sir Echo, and he said, "Okay, gang, what we're going to do now?" And there was a gang of kids, probably 20, 30 kids, and a lot of them were, 10, 11 years old, and he said, "We're gonna," and there was a big woods right behind the golf course. He said, "We're gonna have a little party here." He said, "We're gonna play Little Sir Echo." And everybody said, "Oh, how do you play that?" He said, he pointed to one boy, he said, "I want you to climb up that tree." And then he said to others, he named about 2 or 3 kids for each tree, and he had about 6 trees that he put them up. He said, "When I sing Little Sir Echo, you sing, 'Little Sir Echo, how do you do? Hello.'" And then he said, "Well, just echo." He said, "When I say hello, you say hello when I point to you." He said, "When I point over there," he said, "the kids in that tree point, you just say hello, hello, hello." So just went on. Sounded like a big echo. And there was a father and son walking down the fairway, and the 9th fairway was right near where we were. And he said, "What?" The father said, Luke Bassey, his name was. They said to Doug, his son, "What in the world is going on over there?" He said, "Sounded like the caddies are having fun, Dad." And the guys that caddied for him told me later. They told me about their conversation, but they were amazed, and they could hear hello, 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 and it just echoed. And he said, "That isn't good enough. We're going to do this again." And he did it until it just sounded perfect. It just like a big echo across the way, and everybody in the place just cracked up. But I wasn't one of the trees, thank goodness. They had kids up every tree. But one time he said, "Okay, now we're going to have a track meet." And there was one guy out there they called Lightning because he was he was slow in movement and slow in mind, but he'd do anything that Joe Harding told him to do. So he said, "Lightning," he said, you're cross country, I can tell." He said, "You like to run, don't you?" "Yeah, I like to run." And he had him run all around the golf course. It took the guy about a half hour. And the kid come puffing in later. He said, "Oh, you did good." He said, "You can have a bite of my candy bar for that." So, and if you didn't have any money, there was a caddy store there, and everything was a nickel, a candy bar and a pop. But if you didn't have money, you could do it. They said you do it on the cuff. They called it on credit, and it was 15 cents. The caddy master would get an extra nickel. We used to get a Milky Way candy bar and a Coke for a nickel a piece. That'd be a dime. But if you didn't have the money, you just knew you were going to get a loop later. You'd say, I'll take it now and I'll pay you 15 cents when I get in." So that's what they did. They'd write it down. And so that's that's how we would get paid. The first time I caddied, I only made 75 cents for walking around several miles around, toting a heavy bag. For about the first month you caddy, you were a Class B caddy until you learned all the things that a caddy should do. Then later you got to be Class A. You got $1.90, but usually you get a dime tip or a quarter tip. And it doesn't sound like much now, but if you didn't have any money at all, it was a big deal. At least you had some money in your pocket. So from the time I was about 11 years old, I always had a few nickels in my pocket. And I was able to, when I was 12 years old, I told my dad, I said, "You don't have to buy me clothes anymore. I can buy my own clothes." He said, "Wow, that helps." So I'd save up what I could. I didn't have much money, but I'd save it up. And back then, money went a long ways. And in the fall, just before school would start, I'd go to Highland Park. They had some good stores there, and I'd buy shirts and sweaters and shoes and socks and underwear and pants, and I'd have all my own clothes. So once in a while, my dad would buy me something, a pair of shoes or something, but very seldom. So I felt good about that. And then Keith and Kenny caddied later when they grew up. So we all found a way to make some money. Oh, one way we could walk around town. Mr. Culver lived in behind us on the next street over. He lived on Robert Street. We lived on Otis, right near Russell Street in Hazel Park. And he would buy, we called him a sheeny. It was a junk man. He'd buy anything that you had, like if it was iron or lead. Sometimes we'd find a bottle that said 3 cents deposit on a milk bottle. But anything that we found, he'd weigh it and give us money for it. And there was a dump in town where the Hazel Park High School was built on the back of it. Later was at Beecher Junior High. That was further down the street on Otis toward Gunnar. We'd go down there and roam through this old junkyard and this garbage dump. We'd find things that we thought would sell. We'd bring it back to Mr. Culver, and he would pay us for it. We were lucky if we got 16, 18, 20 cents, but at least that was a few cents in our pocket. Finally, Keith, when he was about 6 years old, he said, I want to go with you. I want some money of my own too. I said, okay. So Kenny and I took him with us, and I think this one day in particular, I got 15 or 16 cents from Mr. Culver, and Kenny got probably a dime, and Keith got, I think, 3 cents. And he said, Keith, how much do you think yours is worth? And he said, well, I think it's worth at least 5 cents. I want to buy a Coke. And he said, no, I'm going to give you 3 cents. So Keith said, oh boy. So, but he gave him 3 cents, I think. And so we went to Mr. Hilly's store. It was just down the road about a couple hundred feet. We went over there, and he said, what do you boys have? And I said, I'll have a candy bar and a Coke. And Kenny said, I'll have the same. And Keith said, I want the same. And Keith put 3 cents on the counter. He said, that's not enough, Keith. Yeah, it must be enough. He said, so Kenny and I said, well, we'll make up the difference. So they got a kick out of it. That's the first time Keith ever tried to drink out of a straw. And he made bubbles in it instead of sucking in. He blew on it, on the straw at first. And Mr. Helly, his wife, Mrs. Helly, they loved Keith, and they said, Keith, that's not doing it right. You gotta go like that. And so, so he did. But we had a big time. The rest of our life, we teased him about that.